We're going to be looking at Mark chapter 5 this morning, so if you're going to go ahead and turn there, let's look into Mark chapter 5 in just a second. We're going to shift gears here as well a little bit. Somber, sobering things that we're thinking about. As we shift gears, I want to tell you about my life group last week, all right? And I don't know if you're in a life group or not. We've got about half our congregation is in life groups. If you're not, man, I really would like for you to get into one of those. If you want to know how to do that, see Tim Shoulders or Rick Fancher or me, and we'll sort of guide you in that direction. But just in case, let me tell you what happened in mine. Our life group met in my house, at my home last week. It hasn't done that a lot lately because of different things that have been going on, so it was a pleasure to have everybody there. And what we do in our life group is everybody meets and eats, and we have fellowship. That's great. And we have prayer time and prayer requests and share lots of stuff. And there's a lot of things that go on. A lot of nonsense goes. Joanne Gunther's in our group, so you know a lot of nonsense going to happen there. Anyway, you look at that. So, and then we have a study. And usually, unless we're in a series of something, and we've done that several times where we had a little series of things, the person who's hosting, well, they're responsible for the devotional thought or the study or something along those lines. And last Sunday morning, Bill came to me and he says, because he knows it's at my house, right? Bill and Mary Oberly are leaders in our group. And by the way, if I was looking for anybody to be like poster kids for life group leaders, it'd be Bill and Mary Oberly. I'm telling you that seriously. They're sitting right over here. I just really love and appreciate these guys. But he's telling me, he says, now, you know, you got the, and you know what? I'd really forgotten that. I didn't act like I'd forgotten it. Did I, Bill, or did I act like I'd forgotten that? Did I pretty much? Okay, so I said, oh, okay, well, I can handle that. We got that. He said, okay, you got that. I said, yeah, I got that. So we come last Sunday evening, and we're meeting together for our life group. And as we're getting ready to eat, Bill says, hey, you know what? If you don't have that, he said, I got something I can do. It's kind of like he was sort of pulling something out of the air there, you know. He said, I got something I can do. And I said, no, Bill, I got this. I'm glad to. I can do this. This would be great. It would be good. He said, well, I don't mind. I said, I know, and I appreciate that. So we go and we eat together and whatever. And so we're migrating into the living room where there's about 12 or 13 of us in our group that are there that evening. And we're migrating in the living room. We're getting ready. And Bill says, well, are you sure he said, I don't mind really sharing some things. He said, I got to thinking about some stuff and I don't mind. And all of a sudden it hit me that maybe God was talking to me and speaking through Bill, that God had put some things on his heart. And if God can speak through a donkey, he can speak through Bill. You know what I'm saying? So I'm thinking, well, yeah, Bill, you do this. You take this. Let me get out of the way. And I'm so glad I did. Because when we got together, Bill, after we do we take care of some business, and then we do, have to do a lot of praying, and then we get down to looking at some stuff. And Bill talked about a meeting that he had earlier last Sunday afternoon. It was a leadership meeting with all the elders and leadership people in the congregation, deacons and life group leaders and Bible class supervisors, and on it goes. And he said, this meeting, the elders met, they shared some things with us, and they did. They shared some great things with us. And he said, but then we broke down into groups. And each group had 3 questions they needed to discuss. And he said, those questions bothered me. I don't like the questions, he said. He said, but here's what we discussed. And he said, I want you guys to think about these questions. He said, here's the first question we had to discuss. He said, hold on. He said, how can we help one another be more intentional about seeking life transformation by the Spirit of God? And those of you that are members here, you'll recognize that. That's kind of playing off one of the main verbs in our mission statement. Our mission statement says, we're here to honor Jesus. And amen, may that always be that way. But then it talks about 3 verbs by which we do that. We seek transformation of the Spirit, we build bridges to our community, and we create disciples who make disciples. And so the questions were around those 3 verbs. And he said, here's the first one. How can we help one another be more intentional about seeking life transformation by the Spirit of God? And he said, what does that mean to y'all? He said, I'm having trouble understanding that question. He said, what does that mean to y'all? And so we kind of talked about it a little bit, and then he talked about what that question meant to him. And basically what he said, I can't tell you exactly what he said, but he said basically it's asking me, what am I personally doing to help all of you guys become more spiritual and seeking the Spirit of God? And everybody kind of said, yeah, that's it. He said, okay, so we talked about that for a minute. He said, well, here's the second question. How can we help one another be more intentional about building bridges with our community? And so he said, what does that mean to you guys? So we talked about that a little bit. And then he keyed in right there on the word intentional. He said each one of the questions have the word intentional in it. What are you doing on purpose, to help all the rest of us carry out this vision and this mission? Then we talked about that for a minute. Then he went to the third one. How can we help one another be more intentional about creating disciples who make disciples? And he says, you know what? He says, it bothers me. Because he says it makes me think. And it's hard for Bill to think. I want to tell you that right now. He's a great life group leader, but it's hard for him to get down and really think. All right? Kind of like you and me. He said, it made me think about other questions. He said, I want to ask you. He said, here's my other questions. He said, what is a disciple? And we all kind of sat there like, well, okay, is this a trick question? Sort of, kind of thing. And so we talked about that a little bit. Well, it's a follower. It's somebody that's, whoever it is that they're following or whatever it is that they're following, they're really trying to be like them. And then he said, okay. So well, let me ask you another question. And these are the questions he's asked. You begin to get the picture that he's asking himself after this meeting. And he said, well, here's another question. Are you a disciple? And you know what? In this big room, it's kind of easy to avoid direct questions. You know what I'm talking about? Because you're looking at the back of somebody's head. But when you're in a circle about 13 people and you're trying to figure out, really, what are we doing here and what are we going to do with that? It's hard to avoid that. So he says, are you a disciple? Well, we sat there in silence for a minute and said, yeah, of course we are. We're doing it. He says, okay. He says, let me ask you another question. He said, do the people that you come into contact with, casually or otherwise, where you get your hair cut or whatever you do they know that you're a disciple? And then he says, how do you know they know? How intentional are you really? He says, now here's why these questions have bothered me, because it makes me think that maybe I need to rethink this business of discipleship. Maybe I need to look at it a different way. And so as he's going through all that, I'm thinking, dear God, thank you for letting me hear Bill wanting to lead this group, because it was exactly what I needed to hear and exactly where I needed to be. And I don't know how you feel about being kind of confronted with that sort of stuff this morning, but it made me think about the series that we've been involved in all through the summer on 2 Corinthians, that we're in this parade, that God's leading us, that we have this light inside of us, and He puts us in those places where we can bear witness and bear testimony. And it's difficult. Let me tell you, it's difficult, because right now you are living in a country that's different than it's ever been before. And I'm not decrying that. I'm not moaning about that. I just want you to know, I'm just saying that's the way that it is. And it's becoming more and more different with each decade that goes by. Predictions I read about what it's going to be like in the next 15 to 20 years is scary stuff, y'all. And so how do you share a message in a culture that is by and large negatively reactive to not just what we say, but to who we are? How do you say? So that's when I got to thinking about Mark chapter 5, as Bill was talking, as we were kind of unloading this, because it fits right in line with what we've been talking about in 2 Corinthians, but it's right from the mouth and the lips of Jesus. So look at Mark chapter 5 just for a second. We're really interested in the first 20 verses. And in verse 1, he kind of tells us where he is. Jesus and his disciples have sailed over to the eastern side of the Sea of Galilee, depending upon what translation you have in verse 1. It may call it the Gerasenes, it may call it the Gadarenes, it may call it Gadara. Not sure exactly where that is, but it's in an area that was not as heavily populated with Jews as it was on the western side. A lot more Gentile influence in there. I'll tell you where it was in general, because he talks about the Decapolis later on. And in general, it's not too many miles southwest of where ISIL is doing its thing right now. Okay? So verse 2, he gets out of the boat, and he meets this really weird guy. I mean, not just weird, but bizarre. A bizarre thing happens. When Jesus got out of the boat, verse 2, a man with an evil spirit came from the tombs to meet him. Now try to visualize this in your mind. This man lived in the tombs, and no one could bind him anymore, not even with a chain, for he had often been chained hand and foot, but he tore the chains apart and broke the irons on his feet. No one was strong enough to subdue him. And night and day among the tombs and in the hills, he would cry out and cut himself with rocks. Is that bizarre? And what is he crying out in the middle of the night? Is that a moan? Is it what is that? Well, he's disturbed at least, right? We'll come back to that in just a second. So when Jesus saw him from a distance, when he saw Jesus, verse 6, from a distance, maybe he's up in the mountains, maybe he's hiding behind the rocks, maybe he's doing his thing, and he sees Jesus landing way down here from a distance, a long way off. He runs and fell on his knees in front of him. Try to get a picture of that. This naked man running down the hillside and falling down at the feet of Jesus. Something's going on here, right? He shouted at the top of his voice. How loud was that? He shouts at the top of his voice. I mean, as soon as you see and hear, you know something's not right. He shouts at the top of his voice, "What do you want with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God?" Now, I wouldn't expect something like that from a guy like that, would you? Something is clearly happening here, some kind of clear connection that we don't really know about. And Mark does not go on to describe it. Jesus does not go on to elaborate on it. He just says, all right, swear to God that you won't torture me. For Jesus had said to him, "Come out of this man, you evil spirit." Then Jesus asked him, "What is your name?" And the thought was, back in those days, you proclaim the enemy's name, you exercise power over them, authority over them, right? "My name is Legion," he replied, "for we are many." And he begged Jesus again and again not to send them out of the area. What's that all about? Well, that's the first 10 verses, verses 11, 12, and 13. Demons say to him, Legion says to him, "Hey, there's a herd of pigs over here. Send us into the pigs and not out of the area." And Jesus says, "Oh, okay. There's 2,000 pigs over here." So they go, and he allows them. That's what the text says. He allows it. I don't know all the things and how the power of God works in every way, and you don't either, right? But somehow or another, in this point of confrontation, they're saying to him, they're getting permission from him as to where they can go. So he allowed them to go into the pigs. They fill the pigs fall into the water, and they drown. And there you are. Now pause here just for a second. What is going on here? Have you ever seen anything like that? The Talmud is back in the day of Jesus. That was called. That's what they were referred to when they talked about the things of the elders, the writings of the elders. It's a long, hundreds of years commentary on Old Testament and all kinds of stuff. The Talmud says there are 4 signs of insanity. One sign is, out of these 4 signs, if all of them are there, you're dealing with an insane person, right? One of them is you walk around at night. Because back in those days, you don't have street lights and stuff. It's really dark. You walk around at night, something's not right. Number 2, you sleep on a grave. Number 3, you tear your clothes off. And number 4, when you get right down to it, if anybody gives you anything, you destroy anything that anybody gives you. This guy had all 4 of those. Is that what's going? Is this guy just insane? Is this just an accommodation for insanity, you guys? Is that what that is? Well, except for the fact that he's got this superhuman strength, right? He can tear chains. He can break bonds. Nobody can constrain him. Nobody can restrain him. So really, what are we talking about here? Is it demon possession? You know what? Some people want to say it's accommodating language, but here's my notion about that. My view of inspiration does not allow me to say this is just an accommodating kind of language sort of thing. Something's going on here. There is an unseen realm that we're dealing with, right? Unseen realm that we're dealing with, and we see the effects of that all around us. Something more than just insanity is happening here. Some people say, well, you don't see it like that anymore because when Jesus was on earth, Satan was given a measure of power so that he could demonstrate, all of that. Well, maybe that's right. But the Bible didn't say that anywhere, right? That's somebody's speculation, so your guess is as good as mine about that. But the fact that they're demons, this is his world. The world is his realm. This is where he rules, Satan and all of his demons, right? And sometimes you come head to head with evil and you know it, right? There's a guy named Scott Peck. I've mentioned him before. He wrote a book called The Road Less Traveled. The book is okay. What I really remember is the preface or the introduction. I don't remember which it is, but the book is worth the price. Whatever the book costs, it's worth that introduction that he talks about. I'm not here to say that. He became a Christian. He's a psychiatrist who became a Christian later on in his life, during his career, during his practice. He becomes a Christian, and he writes about treating a little boy, a young man, 15 years old, named Bobby, who's in this really, really dark place. And he can't break through. He can't get in to help Bobby. And then things really get bad when his older brother, who's a year older, 16 years old, kills himself with a .22 rifle. So now the boy's he's really removed. And Peck is trying every way in the world to get through to this guy. And so one day he says, well, I'm just going to have some conversation. I'll just try to get in any way I can. So he just asked him a casual question. He said, what did your parents get you for Christmas this year? And Bobby says, a gun. And Peck says, surely that's... I mean, he was flabbergasted, but he didn't show it at all. He said, what kind of gun? He said, a .22. And Peck is about to jump out of his chair. He can't... But he's real calm. He says, he said, your parents gave you the same kind of gun that your brother killed himself with. And Bobby said, no, it's not the same kind of gun. And Peck felt some relief until Bobby said, it was the same gun. So then he goes and he tries to talk to the parents, and the parents won't accept any responsibility. They won't take anything. They won't embrace any of it, any kind of moral responsibility, any kind of sense of wrongness about that at all. And he said, now look, at the time, and he wasn't a Christian yet, right? He said, I didn't have the language, I didn't have the vocabulary to know what to call that. He said, it's evil. It's just evil. And he said, even though I couldn't name it, I felt it. I mean, it was palatable. It was there. And he said, I went to my superiors, my supervisors, and they're psychiatrists. They're not priests. They didn't have a language for that. They didn't know what to call it either. He said, since I've become a Christian, he says, I know exactly what it is. It's evil. I think wherever we encounter evil, we're seeing the reality of this unseen world. And there's something being communicated in this story in Mark chapter 5. Here it is, number 1. Satan is real. He's absolutely real. And also, his mission is here. What is Satan? Where did he come from? I don't know all the answers to all that, but I know why he's here. Now, grab a hold of this, because I think it's important. His mission is to destroy and distort the divine likeness that's inside all of us. We're made in whose image, y'all? God's image. Satan's mission is to destroy or distort his image within us any way that he can. This is an example. Here's an extreme example, but here it is. That's what he does. That's what he does. And his power is beyond our ability alone to deal with. I know that when I catch Satan crawling around in my own brain. Thoughts that I have that I don't want to have. Is that anybody else in here? Where does that junk come from? I'm not big enough on my own to handle that. And I understand that it's here because this is his realm, right? I enjoy life and I love life, but this is his realm. But you see, there's also someone else in the story, and that's Jesus. And Jesus is showing his power. He is showing his stuff. In fact, that's what he's been doing in the book of Mark all the way through up until this point. Chapter 1, he demonstrates his power over physical illness. It's nothing. Be healed, touch, a look. Chapter 2, he demonstrates his divine power, his divine authoritative power over sin. Chapter 4, he shows his power over nature. He calms a storm with his voice. And that's the first time that Mark records that the disciples were afraid. I mean, they were afraid of what their lives were in danger, but when they saw what he did as he calmed that storm in that little bitty boat, they were terrified. And he said, what are you afraid of? Why don't you just believe? And by the way, there's a definition in there. The opposite of belief is not unbelief. You know what the opposite of belief is? Fear. He said, all you got to do is believe. And then chapter 5 rolls around and he shows his power. against the things that scare us the most, the things that we don't understand, the things that we can't figure out, those things that don't seem to have an answer. Jesus Christ is the answer. Jesus Christ is the answer. He is the healer. He is the only one that can deal with the ill. And I'm not opposed to all the other things that go on, but Jesus Christ is the one that heals, and that connection with Him. That's the thing. Let the whole church say amen. That is right. Absolutely right. Now look at the response of the people here in this story. These guys that were taking care of the sheep, the pig herders, what do? They run off. They got Lucy got some splaining to do. They've lost 2,000 pigs. They go back into town and they try to explain that and they tell the story to the townspeople. You get the idea that the entire village empties out to go see this. I mean, there's got to be some kind of reckoning for the pigs, right? And maybe there's other motives as well. I don't know. But here they go. And if you look, it says, when they saw this man clothed, he had clothes on, sitting down in his right mind. Look at verse 15. Last few words. They were afraid. But I'm going to be honest with you. The power of Jesus scares me. And that's the reason why it's hard for me at times to just let go, to just let Him, give Him control of my money, my time, It's a little bit like the Chronicles of Narnia by C.S. Lewis. I think there's 6 volumes in that. I don't know which one it was. I think maybe it's Prince Caspian, but I don't know for sure. At the end of it, Lucy, I think it was Lucy, is speaking to somebody, and Aslan the lion is walking off after this great victory. It's right at the end of the story. He's walking off and kind of disappearing. She wants to run off and go catch him, and the guy she's talking to says, no, let him alone, because after all, he's a wild animal. Aslan the lion is the Christ figure in the Chronicles of Narnia. He's a wild animal. And I think what Mr. Lewis is trying to say to you and me is there's a power in Jesus that will not be controlled. It will not be stuffed into a box. It will not be held in our context alone. He will do what He does. He will be who He is. He will go where He goes. And that's scary. Sometimes I'll hold Him at arm's length myself. So they come together, they see all of that, and they say, leave us. Leave us. Look at verse, what is it, 17? Leave us. Get out of our region. Go away. Now, look at what he says. Look at what happens with the guy that's healed. And we've talked about this part before, but not from this context, okay? I want you to think about this. The guy that he healed, what's he trying to do? Jesus, it doesn't say why he went over there in the first place. We don't know exactly. Maybe it was a divine appointment. Like God laid it on Jesus' heart. I want you over here. And so they go. I don't know. But when all that's over, they get back and they're going back to the other side. And the guy that's been healed is trying like everything to get in the boat. I would too. Now, it says in NIV, it says that he wanted to get in the boat to go with him. Literally, in the language is, he tried to get into the boat to be with him. Now, in the book of Mark, that's almost a technical phrase to describe discipleship. Mark chapter 3, for example, when it talks about the purpose of the apostles, it uses that very same construct, the very same language. What is discipleship? It's to be like Him, to be with Him. It's to be with Him. That's how we become like Him, when we are with Him. So He wanted to be with Him. And Jesus says, not no to discipleship, but He says, you're not going to come with me on this trip. I've got something else in mind for you. And when He talks about that, He lays this out. Now, this is a part that's not going to be new to you guys, but think about this just for a second. Jesus said to him, go home to your family and tell them how much the Lord has done for you and how He has had mercy on you. Here's the message. It's what Jesus has done in our life. You've heard me say that before, but man, listen, y'all. The message, our goal is not just to go out and say to everybody, here, repent, believe, confess, and be baptized. It's not to say, Jesus died to save you from all your sin. Most folks out there don't have, unless they got some kind of religious background, they don't have any sort of context to know how to even process that. You seem so disconnected. We seem so out of, it's like it's not even real. He said, here's what I want you to go tell them. What God has done for you. And I'm going to ask you guys, Put it down on paper. I want you to be able to write it. Here's what God has done for me. I don't know what your paper's going to look like. Our paper's going to look differently. Maybe it's going to say, God has delivered me from drugs. God has emptied alcohol out of my life. God has saved my marriage. God, whatever. See? And there's the point of connection. As you look at this passage, he goes back to the Decapolis and he says to everybody he knows, here's what he did. And everybody was amazed. Right? It's not that there's not a place for all those other things, but until they see the reality of it in your life, that's going to be our connection. Are we all on this same page about that? Now listen. I think there's two things that will give us an audience to the world around it. Not because we come to church, that's not going to give them an audience, or because we get up and preach, that's not going to give them the audience. But there's two things that get an audience so that they can hear what Jesus has done for you. Friendship and hospitality. Now think about that. Friendship and hospitality, that opens up doors. That allows your life and their life to overlap in ways to where they can see what Jesus has done for you. It takes time, but as they see that, I want to tell you, they'll move toward you and they'll move toward God in the process. Now listen, guys. Think about this. People are watching you. They watch everybody, but they're watching you. And as an individual and as a community, we are a picture of what God is like to people. We're the only connection we have between God and the reality of their existence. Your life is a book about what God has done in you. That's really the book of 2 Corinthians right there. It's a book. And if they can find one chapter where they can connect one piece of where you might be of help to them, they're going to draw near to you. And in essence, draw near to God. You are always in discipleship mode. Whether you want to be or don't want to be, you are. From the moment you wake up, your kids or your grandkids, I don't care if they're grown kids, your kids, your grandkids, your spouse, the people you work with, you're always in discipleship mode. And the question is what are you showing them? It's just one of two things. You're going to show them what it means to trust in God or to trust in themselves. And if they can't see something authentic in our life, they're going to find another tree to climb. And you may be thinking, well, man, I don't know that I can do that. I don't know that I can really get out there and just do that and be. You know why? That's why it's so cool to join with other people, other believers, and say, you know what, we got some folks we want to share with. And you you take the time to commit your life to just living life with the folks around you in a more intimate way. You guys ever watch the Andy Griffith Show? Let's close this thing. Y'all ever watch Andy Griffith? Yeah. See, from the time I was 9 until about 17, that was the show on TV. And so that was a while back, right? So, but I mean, I love it. And because of that, I love the reruns. I mean, I get this nostalgic kind of, it's Andy Griffith kind of thing, And so you probably don't. You think I'm nuts. But oh, come on, let me see. How many people? Yeah, Andy Griffith. Oh, somebody's whistling. Oh, y'all are nuts. Well, there's an episode there where Andy Taylor, he's the star, he's played by Andy Griffith. He's the sheriff of a little town called Mayberry, just outside of Raleigh, North Carolina, a little old country town. Andy's got to be out of town, so he leaves Barney Fife, his deputy in charge. Barney that couldn't put a bullet in his gun, had to keep it in his shirt pocket, right? Barney. So Barney's feeling his oats pretty much because Andy's out of town. He's the boss now, so he deputizes a local mechanic by the name of Gomer. Y'all remember Gomer? Yeah. So they're patrolling one night. They're walking the streets of Mayberry. They're the law. They're walking the streets of Mayberry, and there's somebody robbing the bank, the Mayberry Bank. There's somebody robbing the bank, and it terrifies them. They run and hide behind a car, and they're trying to figure out, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? Man, I mean, they are scared to death. What are we going to do? Andy's out of town. What are we going to do? And Gomer turns around and says, Barn, he said, we need to call the police. And Barney said, and you remember how bug-eyed he could get, and his eyes like wide open. He says, we are the police. We are the preachers. We are the missionaries. We are the message of Jesus Christ. Can we serve you in any way? Elders and their wives are going to be at the back. If you want to come up front, either way. If we can serve you, let us know as we stand and sing.
Everyone needs compassion. Love that's never failing. Let mercy fall on me. Everyone needs forgiveness. The kindness of a Savior. The hope of nations. Savior, He can move the mountains. My God is mighty to save. He is mighty to save forever. Author of salvation. He rose and conquered the grave. Jesus conquered the grave. So take me as you find me. All my fears and failures. Fill my life again. I give my life to follow everything I believe in. Now I surrender. Savior, He can move the mountains. My God is mighty to save. He is mighty to save forever. Author of salvation. He rose and conquered the grave. Jesus conquered the